Hey, I get it when you're standing in the shop and the metal you're trying to finish just won't quit showing those stubborn ridges. The first thought is, maybe I need a bigger belt grinder. I've heard that a lot from folks who are about to pour money into a machine that looks massive on paper but might end up sitting idle because it doesn't fit their workflow. You're probably wondering if splurging on a 4 HP industrial grinder is worth it, or if you'll end up with a piece of equipment that just takes up space and gathers dust. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. And I'm going to walk through why the KAKA BG3 could be the right fit or why it might be a misstep before you hit that buy button. First, let's talk about what you actually need from a belt grinder in a real shop environment. If your day-to-day involves shaping thick plates, grinding weld beads on structural steel, or prepping hull sections for a ship repair job, you need a machine that can keep up with the heat, the force, and the volume. The KAKA BG3 is built around a 4 HP, about 3 kilowatts, motor, which puts it in the upper mid-range for bench-type grinders, but still below the massive floor-mounted units you'd see in a full-scale fabrication plant. That power translates to a steady belt speed that can handle 79-inch wide abrasive belts without bogging down, so you can strip mill scale or grind down a weld bead in a single pass on an inch plate. For a shop that runs multiple jobs a day, that speed and torque can shave off a lot of manual sanding time. The biggest practical advantage of the BG3 is the adjustable grinding head. In a cramped shop, being able to raise or lower the belt to match the workpiece thickness is a game changer. I've seen people set up a similar machine on a shop floor with a sturdy workbench and simply slide a 2-inch thick steel block under the belt, then crank the head up just enough to keep the belt flat on the surface. The result is a consistent finish without having to constantly realign the piece. Because the belt is 79 inches long, you get a longer grinding zone, which is helpful when you're working on long sections of pipe or rail. You can start the grind at one end and glide the piece across without worrying about the belt losing traction mid-run. Stability is another point that often gets glossed over in spec sheets. The BG3 sits on a 187-pound cast iron base. That weight isn't just for show. It dampens vibration and keeps the belt from walking when you apply pressure. In practice, that means you can lean into the metal a little harder without the whole unit shimmying, and the finish stays uniform. I've watched a small fabricator use a similar heavy base on a concrete slab, and the belt stayed rock solid even when grinding down an inch plate that was starting to heat up. The trade-off, of course, is that the machine isn't exactly portable. If you ever need to move it from one bay to another, you'll need a dolly and a couple of strong hands. Now, let's get honest about the downsides, because every tool has a sweet spot. First, the sheer mass and footprint of the BG3 mean you need a solid floor, preferably concrete, to support it. If your shop is on a raised wooden platform, you might feel the base flexing after a few minutes of continuous grinding. Second, the 4 HP motor draws a decent amount of power, so you'll want to make sure your electrical circuit can handle it without tripping. Most single-phase 120V outlets can run a 4 HP motor, but you'll need a dedicated breaker. Otherwise, you risk overloading a shared line, especially if you have other equipment running at the same time. Another practical consideration is belt availability. A 79-inch wide belt isn't the standard size you find in a typical hardware store. You'll likely be ordering them from a specialty supplier, which can add a little lead time and cost. That said, the wide belt does mean you get more surface area per change, so you won't be swapping belts as often as you would with a narrower unit. If you're a shop that runs 8-hour shifts, you'll appreciate the longer belt life. But if you only need a grinder for occasional hobby projects, that extra belt length could feel like overkill. Who should walk away with a KAKA BG3? If you run a small to medium metal fabrication shop, a welding shop that does structural steel, or you're part of a marine repair crew that needs to grind large plates regularly, this machine lands right in the sweet spot. The combination of power, belt size, and adjustable head lets you tackle thick material without having to bring in a full-scale floor grinder, which would cost several times more and require even more space. The cast iron base also means you can keep the grinder running for long periods without worrying about fatigue or loss of accuracy. In other words, if you're pulling